All right, good afternoon. To September 27, 2019, take 5 of Learn Digital Advertising's Internet Marketing Trends. Holy what is it? Juan has video, everyone.
It's meant
to be. Let's roll with this, guys. Let's roll this. I'm one of your hosts, Rick Maggio with LearnDigitalAdvertising.com.
Welcome back, guys. I'm Juan.
And joining us today are Billy Ash, the Chief Digital Officer at Today's Business. Hi, Billy.
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having us today.
You bet. And Forrest Old, Senior SEO at Today's Business. Thank you as well, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so what we do in this segment is we basically aggregate some recent stories and identify internet marketing trends, and we just want to throw some stories that we've reported on recently to you guys and get your feedback on, from the agency standpoint, as well as just in general with, the way internet's going and marketing's going. So, Juan, you want to pass through some of those stories?
Yeah. We set up a couple of topics here to cover with you guys and see what your thoughts were. And the first topic we got here is web privacy. Really big for 2019. A lot of companies taking a strong direction in web privacy. And it looks like the first topic, the news article we want to talk about is how Firefox blocked cookies, essentially blocking Google Analytics by default in the browser, and also how Google rebutted to that and asking for a fair set of guidelines to be able to have some sort of agreement amongst all the different browsers and keeping the internet the natural way of free content and cookies and be able to monetize that way for Google. As far as your thoughts on that, Forrest, I know you've given us a couple of thoughts on it already, but you give us a good idea.
Ultimately, let's start with Mozilla first. So we're talking about a browser that once was one of the biggest ones. Chrome comes in about 10 years ago, has really just taken over the market for virtually, 60-70% of people in the United States. So we're looking at, in terms of short-term use, Chrome is still going to hit the vast majority of people. That's Google's baby. They're not going to disable things for digital marketers because they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. Meanwhile, with Mozilla, we have about 6 to 7% market share as that as a browser. This setting is only default for new installs. So right now we're looking at 0.5% of users at the very most who might be actually hiding themselves from digital marketers. So in the short term, I'm not really that concerned. Now, as things go along, we've seen GDPR come out last year. We've seen things with Facebook. We've seen things with Firefox now. We've seen browsers and search engines come together before for things such as schema to work together on a standard set of guidelines. Google's obviously proposed something. I'm sure that there will be some modifications coming along, but Google's too powerful. Digital marketing is too important to modern day use that we aren't going to be able to do something with, whether it's keeping cookies and just hiding users in some new way, or if it's developing a new sort of pixel technology which satisfies these privacy concerns that people have. But ultimately, as things go down the line, if we're seeing less information come in and we have a harder time of reporting to clients, it's on us as the strategists to convey the significance of this to our clients. It makes things challenging, but we saw at one point that Google Analytics used to have keywords. Now you basically see 2 or 3 keywords and 97% of that's obscured, but we have Search Console. I'm not too concerned about this. We just have to see how things evolve and make sure that we're on top of it.
Of course.
The only thing I'd add to that, Forrest, is that it just makes us as marketers, it makes the data that we are able to control, the email addresses that we're acquiring, and really all the information we're able to acquire from our users by them providing it to us, makes that more prevalent, just because controlling the data that they can't take away from you is definitely something we should be moving forward towards.
Yeah, all good points. Yeah. And then Billy, to you, specific to Facebook. Now, Facebook has recently enabled users the ability to see sort of who's tracking them, as well as to clear, specific cookies. And in addition to that, to just block them altogether as far as any sort of tracking with regards to Facebook. What are your thoughts on the advertising end and also just from the long-term trend there? What impact do you think that's going to have? Are users just going to go gung-ho and just just say, no, don't track me anymore? Or, what do you think?
Well, I'm not doing that. And I know that you like that, Rick, as well. I'm always been a big believer in send me targeted advertisements. I'd like to see things I'm interested in, not things I'm not. In regards to the Facebook policy, I think this obviously comes down to all of the government issues that have been coming to play. Definitely plays a large role in what Facebook's trying to do with their PR approach. We've all seen the commercials lately. If not, you're not watching any TV. But everything within Facebook is, we're going to be transparent. We're going to show you everything. If Facebook's reputation says anything, they're going to tell you that, and then they're going to manipulate the data some other way to market to you. So as a marketer, I'm kind of a little bit scared, because last year they took away 1/3 of my targeting options because they said we were all racist. And then this year they said that we're just trying to pinpoint everybody and market to one specific user. So, Facebook made a huge change when they eliminated those targeting options and invested a lot into the pixel. So the fact that Facebook's allowing this just makes me believe that they have other ways to make sure that if you visited that website, that you're going to see those tailored advertisements. And that could be based on profile information, all of the other apps that they're beginning to grow or beginning to own, or their display network. So I really think may change some things, but Facebook's got to produce that money one way or another. They're not going to block us from having any ROI on our advertisements. So that's kind of my summary.
Just to jump in there, one more thing, like when you really think about user behavior, how many people do we really think are going to go in and edit their privacy settings? I mean, no offense to certain demographics, but I know some people just don't know how to navigate that stuff or don't pay attention to it. And some of this has been sensationalized and has been part of political grandstanding. Does it have an impact? Absolutely. We've already seen it have an impact, but will this potentially die down? It's something that we also have to consider, that is this just the flavor of the month thing where we see things digitally just move forward in a different way, and the people who are making the rules just have another 2 years to catch up and understand. So in some ways I'm not concerned, but in other ways it's to be determined, I guess.
Yeah, I would just say, Forrest, you made a big point on there, is truly who's going in and doing that. If you're able to go in and figure out how to block your Facebook advertisements, which they're not making easy to do, you're probably the person that this isn't affecting. My mom, who I would be sending all of my Facebook advertising to because she makes the purchase decisions in the house, has no idea how to change her email, let alone get rid of all of our Facebook advertising. So I think we'll be pretty safe until at least our generation gets to be the older group.
Yeah, I didn't want to name drop my mom, Bill, but I'm
Sorry. Sorry, Donna.
No, all really good points, and I think as marketers we all can agree that we hope this gets sorted out. To Billy's point about the lawmakers being 2 years behind, we hope that the industry themselves, the Facebooks, the Googles, can all sort of get along and come up with sort of that common good, privacy to protect privacy, but at the same time keep ads relevant, and most importantly for the end user, keep content free. And that's hopefully where we'll end up. We'll see where it goes. So let's jump into some SEO changes here. I guess I can lead with this, Juan. The recent changes to SEO specific to snippets and rich results. I've got this example I wanted to pull up quickly here, and this is a double stacked snippet here, and this is something that Juan actually found. Juan. And I hadn't seen anything double stacked like this before, and it just led me to think how much of our content is going to end up completely on Google and off our websites. How much of it, how much control are we going to have? And recently Google has released sort of some guidelines for how to control that a little bit. So within the HTML of a web page, you can actually control, how much character-wise, of a snippet could be taken, or whether a snippet could be taken at all from a certain page or video or image. So kind of this whole new set of controls for webmasters to control what gets pulled into the SERPs. What does this say to you as far as where we're going, both on the client side and immediately, like what do we do about it now for our clients? And then going down the road, what are the SERPs going to look like in a year or 6 months even from now? How is this going to change? What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Bill, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I think the role that rich snippets have played in the last year has obviously continued to grow. I think this is really in line with a conversation I was having the other day about a rich snippet that we had and received that honestly didn't answer the question. Things like that happen, and I think this is Google's combat to that. Hey, I want to list my top 5 things and I'm getting a paragraph within my rich snippet. That's not great. Hey, how do I fundraise and I'm getting 5 ways to download your app? That is fundraising, but it's not really answering the question. Those are type of the things that I think Google's really trying to combat with this, and just make sure that the information they are providing is correct. In regards to keeping people off the site, I think this plays a huge role in what people consider, and I mean, this is the most cliche marketing term but the thought leader within the industry. I think this kind of plays a role. I know, everybody. But listen, I think the whole thought leader of having and controlling a rich snippet means something. People don't understand things. People understand one thing about Google: if you show up number 1, you must be right. It used to be like almost like the old pricing model. Like, oh, if you have the highest pricing product, you must have the best product. It's not always true. I would say 70% of the time it's not. But I think us as marketers kind of just have to make sure that the snippets that we are attaining are relative. I believe that this is really Google's combat to make sure that we aren't trying to manipulate that and we are providing those users. And the last thing that I'll say about this is Google's been trying to keep everybody on site for at least the last year. Everything that they're doing within the discover phase, AMP integration, which we're going to get to, everything is really going towards stay on our site, we'll answer your questions, and we'll provide you to the correct direction. So as marketers, yeah, I think it's about making sure that our snippets are correct. I know we've talked about different things like manipulating snippets, how we can do those things. Juan was talking about that a little bit before in our previous conversations. But I think there's a lot that we can do there. But yeah, Forrest, what are your thoughts?
Forrest, what are your thoughts on that?
For me, I mean, ultimately, this is kind of Google asking for help for a little bit. Like, as Billy said, featured snippets, how often are they really right? It just kind of speaks to where Google's AI is and where its algorithm is. I can look up a sports team and see that for the sport team's players, we're seeing players who haven't been on the team for about 10 years. There's work to be done. And so they're looking for help from the webmasters and the SEOs of these sites that are truly competitive to help curate better content for the end user. And as marketers, we have that incentive of, if we help Google out, if we're doing things right, we're making it easier for them to display a better result, we're likely going to be displayed more consistently. And having things which we want to display correctly, whether it's a picture, whether it's the logo of the company, these are things which having greater granular control over, or having the right content within an article get displayed that we had in mind, I think that it's mutually beneficial. Now, when it comes to everything living on Google, I just look at it this way, is that there's going to be an antitrust suit against Google within the next 10 years. So will everything live in Google?
Well, you're giving them a lot of time on that.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let me be a little more aggressive. I will say that there will be a legitimate antitrust suit by 2022. I think that there's already kind of the stirring of the pot by Trump, and like it's already been happening over in Europe. But some of the things that are going to be brought up during this sort of process is how much Google actually controls. So will we see more of a democratization of the results? I think it's very possible.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Definitely. And the news definitely does propagate it a bit. So with that amplification in the background in regards to all of that, definitely I can see that 2022 happening for Google there. So, I mean, as far as moving forward with the SEO changes, like there are some topics that recently came up as far as like an algorithm shift as far as news content, and focusing on the latest news instead of, on the original news instead of the latest news. So Google tends to want to give you the freshest information, right? So, and that has led to a lot of misinformation, I would say, because of the competitiveness of wanting to be the next one up, the next one to get the clicks. So their algorithm, they did take a shift toward original news. What kind of impacts do you think? I mean, it's not a large scale effect as far as like traffic maybe, but maybe in the general terms of this whole fake news situation, what kind of effects do you think that'll have on the future term? What do you think, Billy? Or yeah, Forrest.
As a former journalist, this one.
I was going to say, I'll let Forrest jump in there.
I think that ever since really Time Warner brought out CNN, journalism has been trickling down the drain. And somebody who was a journalism major, seeing half-assed stories come out and just kind of like that sensationalization of the news feed and just every single little update being what you see. If this update means that better quality stories are being written, I'm very happy of that from a consumer standpoint. Now, as a marketer and working with our clients, I think that it's not going to impact that many people, because how many people are actually putting out news on a regular basis, which is really going to stand tall? It's just going to be publishers for the most part. For these publishers, hopefully it incentivizes them to spend a little more time, get their extra sources, and put something together which everybody wants to read. So it's to be determined, because this is just the pendulum swinging in the other direction for Google, trying to get that right balance with the results for the users. But it remains to be seen if consumers will like it. If they don't, well, we'll see it switch back.
As a marketer, I agree with Forrest completely as an end consumer, but as a marketer, I'm very interested. I mean, obviously we're doing an internet news show now. We are reporting back on all of the news that we didn't directly report on. So where's the lines? I don't think we're going to be reporting fake news here. We're just talking about some algorithm shifts. Like, that's where I'm trying to play. Where does it end? I have a lot of B2B companies here that we continually put out industry updates. We want to make sure that there's a latest news about the industry. So-and-so did a store remodeling. We do a lot of B2B for store remodels. That's something that we report back on. Those are things that we included in AMP pages so that we could show up in those that news section. How does that defer to us when it's not a political news section? I would imagine, based on where I would be if I was Google, I'd put all of my efforts into the crap people really care about of original sources and the political world. I'd be interested to see sports. I run a fantasy football website for affiliate marketing. If I write about LaShawn McCoy getting injured this week. Do I have an opportunity to not, or am I never going to show up now because I didn't report back on that? I'm not ESPN. So it's interesting to see how those will actually play in different subject matters when we talk about news.
Yeah, and I'd love to have my eyes on the analytics of some of the larger news outlets to sort of measure exactly what that impact was. You know, with LearnDigitalAdvertising.com, we do publish a lot of news. We're absolutely never the first source. Yeah. That's not our thing. We try to sort of add our value in the analysis of it and everything, but it goes to ask, you know, what is the best answer, right? It's not always the original and it's not always the latest. Chances are it's somewhere in the middle. And quite honestly, with, you know, competing with some monster authority sites, it becomes very difficult because for twofold, I mean, they've got the authority to rank and then they've got the, you know, bankroll to pay for, you know, full-time around the clock sort of reporting. So yeah, it really, I think it seems to, from my view, push that benefit towards the larger corporation again, and going back to just, again, funneling traffic to sort of larger websites. And making it a little bit harder in theory, but for I'd say for, you know, less authoritative sites to rank. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how that plays out because it's, I feel like that's a huge challenge to solve on Google's part. You know, ranking the best tennis shoes is a little bit maybe easier, but news, a lot of complicated factors in sort of identifying, you know, relevance, not only relevance but authority, and, you know, to your point as well, accuracy.
Yeah, that point Billy made about the sports being the latest news, the most relevant, and with something else, the original might be the most relevant. So that definitely hits thoughts there.
Yeah, and another story just to keep moving on. You know, Rank Ranger reporting a loss of 5 characters in the search engine result pages.
Oh crap!
Does that matter?
Does anybody have all their title tags correct? Anyone? Sorry.
Can you even see title tags?
Tells me nobody does.
Can you even see title tags with the rich snippets pushing it all down?
You know, I think that's just, it's a thing, it's a trend. Obviously, as marketers, we want to come up with the best practices and follow all of these trends, but am I going back and re-editing all of the title tags of 400-page website? No. I don't know. Forrest, do you plan on doing that?
I hope not. No, I mean, ultimately, title tags have always been one of those things which SEOs have kind of obsessed over. And why? Because it's the first thing for the web page that people see, along with the actual URL, or nowadays with breadcrumb schema, you see an abbreviated version of it converted into text, and then the meta description. These things do have value for us to manipulate in the way that gets us to rank. Now, in terms of this actually sticking to being 5 characters less, I mean, Google expanded meta descriptions for 2 months and then they took it back and then they changed it again and they took it back. And until I see it for a good solid 3 to 6 months as being, yep, now the best practice is to keep it to, say, 60 or 65 characters, or it goes back to 70, or we really just look at it as like 550 pixels or whatever. I don't know if I really want to pay attention to it right now, because I don't know if it's going to be valid to overhaul all these title tags.
Yeah, no, it's all good points there. I want to jump to AMP next.
Kind of hit home with Forrest. We did update all of our meta descriptions to include those, and then have to revert. Sensitive topic. Sorry.
I'm a little bitter, actually.
You didn't come across that way at all. You handled that very well, I think. I'll give you props for that. So I'm Jekyll and Hyde in general, but especially with AMP and SEO. And as an SEO, I was all gung-ho on AMP when I first heard about it. And then over time, I didn't find numbers really supporting that for client websites, supporting AMP really made a lot of sense. And we seemed to lose out on some conversions as well. But you know, the new articles that are starting to change my mind, AMP, further integrations with like Google Image and AMP content, AMP script being allowed. So to some formats of JavaScript being allowed within AMP pages, which I think is great for user experience and conversion optimization and that sort of thing. As a whole, guys, what are you doing with AMP? Should we care? Should we be all in on AMP and follow the Google Bible for it? Or is it something that's a little bit like, we're not really sure where this is going?
I think it completely depends on the site. For e-commerce, for image-heavy sites, for heavy blogging sites, I think all those, it applies very well to building out a good AMP structure. Now, the big thing with AMP is, most people, let's say they're running a WordPress site and they just activate AMP through a plugin without doing much else. That thing's going to look poor. Yes, you might get a few more impressions, but I absolutely agree with you, Rick, that you're going to get less conversions. But now we're seeing the implementation of AMP script that it's going to free more things up. We're seeing more capabilities as people get used to what the guidelines are for AMP, what you can actually do. I think that as long as Google is really pushing AMP, we're going to need to still cater to it for a certain group of websites.
Yeah, I think Forrest and we've definitely had different opinions throughout the years of AMPs here. I'm with you, Rick. I think, instantly we went gung-ho on it. Everything was amped up. Our impressions skyrocketed and my bounce rate just went the exact same. So, I think there's definitely things.
See, that's a real answer, because everyone else is writing about how awesome AMP is and their traffic's going up and life is so much better after AMP.
Yeah.
But the real answer is, I don't think that's always the case.
No, it's not.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm with Forrest. I think it depends on the page or on the content of the pages. I'd also say that, maybe I was going to say if your site's really slow, you should make an AMP site. But if you're able to make an AMP site, then you should just redevelop your site and not make it slow. So I'll contrast to that. What I will say, though, is something that we are trying. And we're trying it because of what Google's doing with all of their display advertisements now. So Google will now display ads on AMP pages. That is a very big thing because they will also only send you to an AMP landing page from those pages. So that's something that we've been trying to play around with, is building out AMP landing pages for our display advertising, not only just the blogs. The blogs, if you're writing a blog about news, you should absolutely have AMP because you'll never show up in the news section without it. But your average service page, am I amping everything? Not right now. I would be considered my landing pages just because that's all based on a conversion rate and how fast my site loads and mobile traffic.
Makes sense in terms of, with AMP not being fully implemented by any means on most sites, you do have, I guess, an option for cheap inventory. If that's the direction that Google's going with that. I mean, it's going to be cheap inventory for a while until they can either change their mind and send you to regular content or otherwise. It's a good approach.
The last thing that I would, sorry, Juan.
No, go ahead.
The last thing that I would want to throw in there also is, I think that as we move down the future, it's really going to come down to, is AMP going to win out or is HTTP2 going to win out?
That's exactly where I was going.
That's going to give a lot.
Hold on a second. I've been waiting for this moment. Just hold on a second. Back to you, Mr. Old. I spent 20 minutes queuing that up. I had to use it at some point. Forrest gets it today. Thank you.
But no, seriously though, I think that AMP has a lot of benefits, and I think it's not going to go anywhere for publisher sites. But for the average site, the capabilities of HTTP2 are potentially going to override anything that you'd want to do with AMP. It's going to be more versatile. I know that Bruce Clay is a big proponent behind HTTP2. And I mean, that guy's been doing it for decades now. He's one of the OGs.
Godfather.
So I put a lot of faith in what his opinion is when it comes to this sort of thing. So I don't know. It's hard to say where it'll go, but the fact that Google's behind AMP is going to give it a much easier like path to being successful. Just you look at things with like Edison versus Tesla with the AC versus DC back 120 years ago. Edison won out with his current because he was a much better businessman. So
one more time on that, dude. One more time.
I was gonna say, can somebody explain that? Maybe it's over my head.
All right, awesome, guys.
Definitely, yeah. Network effects definitely come into play there. So Google keeps developing it. Got to keep that in mind.
All right, let's wrap this in 10 minutes. Let's try to get through voice search. And I know there's so much to talk about in voice search. Juan, you want to run us through maybe some of the stories?
Yeah. We brought up some stats here to cover voice search. It's definitely a growing, I guess, everyday application for a lot of people. And pretty much as of last year, in the e-commerce space, there were about 31 million people that did their shopping and research on a smart speaker. And that's up 31% from last year. And as far as purchases goes, 21 million of those would actually make purchases. And this is according to an eMarketer study. And I mean, assuming so next year, if last year was up 31%, I can only imagine it can keep going up. And last year, 50% of searches, according to ComScore by 2020, would be voice searches. With that kind of trend in mind, what kind of, I guess, preparation, expectations, thoughts moving forward there? What do you guys think?
You know, the biggest thing here, I mean, we just talked about snippets and making sure that the information we're providing behind the scenes is informative and correct. I think that just goes along with voice search. I'm interested to see how voice search really plays in the e-commerce space. I think it will grow with the development of these at homes. Personally, I only have I have an Alexa and a Google Home, but neither of them have a screen, so I'd never buy anything without a screen. So that's my opinion of the e-commerce. I think this really plays the biggest role in local. Of the 31, I'm very interested to see, there's 31 million people that did research on it. 21 will actually make a purchase. Is that all e-com? Where does that play a role in the fact that when we're done with this, Forrest and I are going to happy hour and I'm asking where's the closest happy hour near me? I'm going to go and make a couple purchases there on Friday, but does that count into this purchase cycle? So I'd be interested to hear about those stats. I think the e-commerce play is really important, but as a marketer, I mean, this is just, if you're not trying to grow in voice search on a local scale, you're in trouble. If you're not trying to grow in voice search as just a general website, you're going to get beat in the long run. I don't think people don't like reading nowadays. We just like watching videos. I don't think people are going to like typing in 5 years. We're just going to want to talk. There's no way that my iPhone in 5 years doesn't just take whatever I say and actually correctly text it or search it. I think we still have some of those problems, which is causing some mishaps. But I know I use my Google Home all day, every day for everything in my house. It controls my lights. It controls everything. So me saying that I needed to order more toilet paper is pretty legitimate. I feel like I'm going to be doing that sooner rather than later.
To kind of follow up on what Bill is saying, like, it's all excellent points. You look at what people are doing now, it's usually to answer a quick question, ask what the weather is, do something in your home. But the middle thing, which is where we see a lot of the stuff that's going on with the schema, is how do we take these things and expand it into interactive experiences on a website? Or rather, do we just remove the concept of a website altogether and just think of it as an interactive entity? So let's say we have a doctor we want to set up an appointment with. We're trying to find a new eye doctor. We search for an eye doctor, then it's like, we have these different results. Then you go to one of the results and then you get like a welcome sort of message from that website. And that is telling people like, please choose from the following in a way which is a little better than the prompt that I would hope that you would get from your local CVS. But imagine a time where you've customized the structured data to your site, where it's providing options in a natural speech pattern to make an appointment or learn more about the doctors or learn more about the procedures that they have and the conditions that they treat. That to me is where we could easily see things move. And ultimately for marketing, that means that SEOs need to get more savvy with technical stuff, and web developers need to continue to grow their skills. So there's a lot of uncharted territory, but I think ultimately the concept of a website and your digital presence is inevitably it's not going to look even remotely close to what it did in 2005 within the next few years.
Those are all great points. And I think a good theme though is just that standardization of data, because for voice and delivery of information to be really accurate, to sort of take that next evolution, how can you at some point, what is AI going to be able to do for that versus a more standard format? I saw this TED talk, and I'm going to be terrible at quoting all the facts of this, but the web founder, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, coming up with this sort of open data project, which is not just web specific, it's data specific in general, but it's more of an effort to get all data in a format where it can be queried and stored and used. And some of the examples I gave were all of these research studies and all the nitty gritty that are behind them that just gets buried in an institution because the institution did the research and everyone else is trying to accomplish the same thing. But on the website, it's just the simple fact of, search engines have played this role of trying to interpret data for all these years. Once we sort of standardize all of this, and I think that voice search is what's going to be a large part of driving this. I think the simple fact that 50% of all searches will be voice, and next year essentially is going to just scream for a solution to do better. I love messing with my Google Home. It is terrible. I actually set a timer yesterday for 25 and a half years, which was pretty awesome. So I'm hoping that thing is still plugged in 25 and a half years, but I always like messing with it, and I got 2 little kids and they do the same thing and it messes up all the time, but at the same time, it's a legit product.
That was one thing that really opened up my eyes as far as voice search. And you mentioned your kids, and it's like, essentially anyone who's, even if you can't write, if your literacy is not there, you can still talk. And that's a whole new audience that's going to be added as far as search goes. It's going to be kids, people who actually have literacy issues. There's a bunch of people that are going to be included in the internet that weren't before. And that definitely does change things, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say just the last thing is, as marketers, voice search is new. You got to test. I know Amazon Skills is something that we've been testing in regards to incorporating that with our WordPress websites. There's a lot of tools out there that will help you build a WordPress website help you build a Amazon skill for WordPress websites. We're doing one in particular in regards to recipes right now, so that you can just say, hey, I need a chicken pie recipe, and it'll actually show up. It'll be our source. Once again, to quote my favorite term, being that thought leader, continuing to kind of just grow that. But I really think which is something that will continue to grow it. And those that aren't testing it and trying new things are just going to be caught at the end.
One last thing, Rick, cue up the Danny DeVito bomb thing.
All right, fingers ready.
By 2025, I think there's a good chance that Siri is dead.
What?
That because Siri can't answer anything?
Absolutely,
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
If you look at, there are stories out there of the nightmares that Apple has had in terms of developing Siri. It was the first one out there, and now it's way behind. I expect that they probably won't go with Google just because they don't want to give anything else to Google. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they opened it up for an auction where Alexa, Cortana, and Google Assistant are bidding for the rights to be the smart assistant on the next iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, I could say just from personal experience, I don't think that product has improved in 5 years.
No, I can't tell you any intelligence. It still answers the same thing. I hate it.
I mean, and the fact, just the pure fact that it has to have an internet connection to do anything even reasonable. Like, and I understand looking up data makes sense, but I can't tell you how many times I'm dropping a Wi-Fi and just heading out in the car somewhere and just completely incapable of doing anything with Siri for 2 or 3 minutes. And it's not a network issue. It's, to me, it's a Siri issue. There's just, the product just isn't good.
And to just kind of follow up on that, ultimately, you're looking at the experience with Android and iOS. They're very, very similar. But if everybody's moving towards smart assistants, Google has just, they're already digging the grave of Siri as far as I'm concerned. They're integrating it better into the operating system. The next Google phone is going to have it run as a standalone feature, so it's going to be even faster. They can now do AI run phone calls with duplex. All these things Apple is not competing with on the same level anymore. So it just remains to be seen, will they sacrifice their smart assistant if it means that they save hardware sales? And I think it's going to be a very real question for them sometime in the future.
Yeah, I think too on the business end, I remember last Christmas, they were basically giving the Googles away. I mean, you could get this thing for like $12 or something. It was, yeah. But it's a total like IBM play to like just become the standard device in every home, just like make it so insanely cheap. And
went to like 3 conferences and everybody gave me a Google Home. Seriously, it was just like, here you go.
I've got 7. I've got 7 in my house, and they're in places that I don't need them by any means. They're just cheap, and I like to be spied upon, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, it's Friday and you got happy hour. Forrest and Billy, thank you guys with today's business, tbsmo.com. You guys are doing great stuff over there. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon. Have a great weekend.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.